In the spring of 2007, Rabbi Ilan Feldman was offered by his congregation to take a short vacation, but he declined because he didn't feel he needed one. But after thinking it over, he decided to take them up on it. But his family was unable to join him, so he didn't know where to go. Until a friend arranged the following unknown adventure. He would fly to an undisclosed location, which would only be revealed to him on the day of his departure, when he would be handed an airline ticket revealing his destination. No accommodations were booked for him, nor was he allowed to take any money or luggage with him, except for a token $50, his tefillin, and a baseball cap and a change of clothes. He wasn't allowed to reveal his identity as a congregational rabbi, or even that he was Jewish, to anyone, and he was only allowed to use his phone once a day, just to check in with his wife. Stripped of all his worldly possessions and his identity, he was to fend for himself for the next 4 days and somehow make it back alive and in one piece to Atlanta, Georgia. The following is the true story of what happened next. In the second part of our conversation, we discussed the rules of public speaking that Rabbi Feldman unabashedly revealed to me that he breaks, the impact that his mentors, Rabbi Emanuel Feldman, his father, and Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, his father-in-law, had on his speaking style. And Rabbi Feldman also imparts the 3 most important pieces of advice he has for new rabbis to be successful. I learned so much from my interview with Rabbi Ilan Feldman, and I'm sure you will too. So now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Rabbi Ilan Feldman. So how long ago was this?
The trip?
Yeah.
It was 2007 as far as I can remember.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And what led up to it?
What led up to it, the short of it was that this was as an assistant rabbi was leaving at the end of the summer, and we did not have an assistant rabbi to replace him. And one of the lay leaders came into my office in May and said, Rabbi Feldman, you need a break, and your assistant rabbi is going to be here till August. Why don't you take off the entire summer? And I looked at him and I said, Ira, I don't need to take off the entire summer. I don't need to. I don't feel like I need a break. I mean, thank you very much, but I'm doing fine and I don't need to. And I really just didn't think, I just wasn't really that interested in taking off or just for the sake of taking off. When he left my office, I said to myself, there's something wrong with a guy whose immediate reaction to an opportunity to take off for summer is, I don't need a break. I don't do something about this. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go away for just a week, whatever it is. And the problem was that my wife, who at the time, until very recently, was the principal of a girls' high school, couldn't take off. Her high school wasn't over till late June, and she was in the intense preparations for graduation and all kinds of other things. I think it was a play she was producing at the end of the year at that point as well. And so there was good news and bad news. The bad news was that I couldn't go with my wife. The good news was I could go without my wife. And that meant that, number one, I did not have to go where a bathroom was within 20 seconds reach. Because as we know, when we travel with women, usually bathrooms have to be more available. Of course, now, as I've aged, I also have to be close to a bathroom. That's another story. The point is, I could do anything I wanted. But only for a few days. So at the point of the conception of this trip, I had no religious, spiritual goals. I wasn't doing this in order to find God. I was doing this to have a good time, and I didn't want to do the regular waterfall thing. I didn't want to go somewhere and read Moby Dick with my feet in the waves. I didn't want to do it. And I, frankly, to be honest with you, although I love Talmud Torah, I didn't want to go learn. I wanted to do something different. So I purposely, I have a rule that I learned from buying ties. If you ask a Jewish person to help you buy a tie, since he knows you're a rabbi, he will always help you buy a conservative, boring tie. If you ask, however, a black salesman to help you buy a tie, he'll actually give you options. So I decided that I happened to, this is another story by itself, in and of itself. I'd love to talk about it sometime. I was at the time I was and still am to some degree a participant in landmark education, which ought to shock some people, but it's actually a very, very good thing for a rabbi to do. And Landmark Education, I met a guy who had designed a website called HMMM, which he said is the sound a person makes when he discovers something new that he never encountered before. So I knew this guy was going to help me create something from nothing that would be really original. So I sat down with this guy, David, wonderful guy, not Jewish. I said, David, I can leave on Sunday. I have to be back on Thursday. And I want to do something different. So this was over a Whole Foods breakfast, a fruit breakfast. We started at 8:30. At 11:30, we had a plan. So for 3 hours, I don't know what we did for 3 hours, but for 3 hours, we came up with the plan. The plan was that since I enjoyed taking the road less traveled by, that's what we would do. We would actually put me on a trip in which I didn't know where I was going, and I would have no possessions, no money, no phone, and actually the idea was to have nothing from my past as much as possible, so that whoever I interacted with and whoever interacted with me would not be dealing with me from the history that they had created about me or that I had created about myself with them, including the fact that I'm Jewish, including the fact that I'm a rabbi. Part of my boring story of life is that I've always been a rabbi's son or a rabbi. That means that everybody interacts with me with their idea of what a rabbi's son is, which meant I couldn't be on the baseball team because rabbi's sons can't play ball, and or what a rabbi is, which means that when I approach people at Kiddush who are having a good animated discussion, they stop talking when I get there because I'm like the conversation police or something. So what would it be like? What's that?
School monitor, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So what would it be? What would it be like if people had no idea of who I was until the moment they dealt with me? And that was one question we wanted to find out. And number two, what would it be like for me to have to be dependent on people and for them to help me on the merits of the request that I made in the moment, not on who they thought I was or who they thought they liked, whatever it is. So the idea was to put myself in a position where I can only make it by requests. So the way my schedule worked, there was an unmissable event on a Thursday night. I had on Sunday, I had an unbelievable rabbinic day, which meant that I had a funeral of somebody that I knew for 45 years, our family doctor, a past president of the shul. I had a wedding in my office, a second wedding. Somebody who lost his wife tragically through cancer was now getting married. We're all thrilled for him, but it was kind of bittersweet for all of us who knew his wife. And then I had to go back to the cemetery for an unveiling. And then after that, I was going to disappear to the airport. My friend went into my frequent flyer account, bought a one-way ticket without telling me where I was going. I was going to go to the airport and find out at the airport where I was going. And I would not know when and how I was getting back to Atlanta 4 days later, Thursday, until the middle of the trip. That was the whole premise. So, of course, I had to take my tefillin.
Wait, let me stop you for a second. What did your family think about this?
Oh, great question. So first of all, the real story behind this is my unbelievable wife, who is a real trooper. I called her in the middle of an unbelievably busy day on a Tuesday. And I said, Miriam, guess what? I just came up with this great idea for a trip. I'm going to go disappear with no money and nothing. And I didn't know it at the time, but she almost started crying. But she didn't have time to talk it. She said, we'll discuss this tonight when we get home. Late that night, I get home about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And I was dismayed all day. I was going, I don't understand. Why is she not excited? Like the dumb male husband that I am. Why is she not excited? Why? So what if her husband's going to disappear into the wild blue yonder with no phone to contact his own wife? So she said, Ilan, I thought about this all day, and I realized there's something available in this for you and for me, and I'm going to agree to it on certain conditions. And the first condition was that I not hitchhike, because she didn't want me to be picked up by the wrong people. I said, okay, I won't hitchhike, but I will go to truck stops to ask truckers to take me if I need to. She agreed to that condition. The second condition, which is really funny, because you and I are talking right now, Condition number 2 is nobody's going to know about this. You can't tell anybody because you'll lose credibility. They'll never trust you again. So I agreed to that condition. So that was on a Tuesday. Shavuos was Friday and Shabbos that year, and I was going to go on Sunday. The reason I mention that is because once I agreed to the trip, it was a fascinating phenomenon. I was scared out of my wits. Where am I going to sleep? How am I going to eat? What am I going to do? How's this going to work? But I was also filled with anticipation. And I gave a sermon on the first day of Shavuos about commitment, based on my father-in-law, Rabbi Shmuel Yaakov Weinberg, Zecher Tzadik Lebracha's approach to the pasuk over there that says, Va'ata Yisrael, Im Shema Tishma'u V'Koli, where the introduction to the Aseret HaDibros, which Rabbi Weinberg had gone through with his Talmidim many times. He was medayik in almost every word because of the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, say these words, lo pachos v'lo yoser, exactly these words, which means it's something very, very basic to Kabbalah Satorah that's included in those words. So, and now Israel, va'ata Yisrael, Rashi says, im tekablu aleichem, something like that. If you accept it upon yourself now, fine. Shekol hascholas kashos, because all beginnings are hard. But then yarav lachem ekan, but it will be sweet to you from this point on. Weinberg would talk about what it means to make a commitment and how difficult it is. That a commitment, by definition, is to bring yourself forward to commit to something that you've not been committed to. That's what a commitment is. And that means that you're not, these are my words, but basically his idea was that you're not arranged. Your life is not arranged for that commitment. All commitments are hard because your life is arranged without that commitment, around everything but that commitment. And so, it was the whole idea of what it takes to be committed to. I talked about John JFK's throwing your hat over the wall metaphor that he uses in Profiles in Courage, and I talked about it with great vigor because I was living through that in miniature with this trip, because I just committed to an insane proposition, and there was something very powerful about the commitment. So that's why I mentioned that. What's that?
You were talking to yourself while you were speaking to everybody else.
Exactly right, which is always, as we all know, the best kind of a drasha. I can sincerely say that when people come to me and they say, Rabbi, you were speaking to me today, I always say to them, thank you very much. I actually was speaking to myself. Because if it doesn't pull me, if I'm not feeling somehow compelled to take something on through that drasha, then I'm just going through the motions. So for years in my earlier years as a rabbi, I in the parshas of Vayikra, Tazria, Metzora, I never spoke about Lashon Hara because I was not interested in working on Lashon Hara. So I felt like I wasn't going to be able to succeed in anything like that. And why would I be talking about Lashon Hara just because that's the thing you're supposed to say, that Lashon Hara is a bad idea? I didn't speak about Lashon Hara until it occurred to me that I was depriving the congregation of their right to hear about the problems and damage of Lashon Hara because I wasn't working on it. So I took it on, and then I was able to talk about it with some degree of personal investment. So back to this. So that was the trip. That was the premise of the trip. So you asked about my family. So my parents, with whom I think I'm very close, of course, they live in Israel, mostly. I didn't tell them about it. And this is a little humorous PS. My father hears about he says, what's this I hear that you took a trip or you were sleeping on park benches? His son became a hobo or whatever it was. So, he must have thought I was going through some midlife crisis. As far as I know, it was not a result of any crisis. It was just something that really was interesting. After the trip was over, and the experiences on the trip are just miraculous. Just I don't know how to describe it. As a matter of fact, sometimes I doubt that they happen now with the passage of time.
How long the moratorium was on that?
The moratorium was on forever. But what happened was, a couple of people knew about it, and at the time we had a program director who was very creative, and she begged me. She said, "Rabbi, you've got to do a program about this thing." And I discussed it with my wife, and we decided that I would do a program after Kiddush. We have a slot in our shul, which is fairly often used after Kiddush, on Shabbos morning. And we announced that I was going to be. I forgot what we announced, and because most people didn't know what this thing was about, but there was a huge crowd, just a huge crowd. And I told the story. It took over an hour. They sat there with their jaws dropping, and I thought after that they would never trust their children to any youth programs in this show. but so that was, and a couple of people came over to me and said, I always knew you were out of your mind, but I did not realize that it was to this extent, So a couple of people I inevitably knew about it. The day of the trip, I was supposed to leave on a 7:30 flight from the airport at 7 p.m. on Sunday. I don't know where I'm going. I'm a nervous wreck. I haven't slept Saturday night. I'm so uptight about it, so worked up. And I've got, like I say, this funeral. Obviously, the funeral I didn't know about till right before Yom Tov. He died on Erev Shavuos, and the funeral was on Sunday. The funeral, the wedding, an unveiling, and all I care about is the trip. I'm going through the motions here, but it's hysterical because the whole goal of the trip was for me to lose my identity as a rabbi. And here I was in 3 events in a row in which we all know the rabbi's wearing the Superman uniform. He's in charge. He knows how to run the funeral, what to say, how to say, the whole thing. This very delicate, emotional wedding in my office. And then the unveiling of somebody who I knew since I was a child. And so it was all, and he had died also tragically of cancer. And so it was a very emotional day, and I'm wearing my Superman uniform.
So tell me some of the highlights from the trip. Tell me some of the more memorable.
Well, I'm talking to you and through you to Rabbi, so I will tell you one thing that is one of the most memorable for a rabbi. Here I am hiding the fact that I'm a rabbi, or that I'm Jewish even. I'm wearing a Falcons t-shirt, a fisherman's cap, some kind of I forgot what you call it, khaki pants, cargo pants, and a knapsack, a backpack, and doing the best I can to not, one of the rules of the game was that I could not approach anybody in the Jewish community wherever I went, because they would obviously help me in a second. And the whole idea was to be helped not on the merits of who I was or who they thought I was, right, but just on merits of just a person showing up and needing help or whatever. So this is the middle of the trip, and I had already by this time discovered that I needed to get to Boston from Buffalo to get my plane back to Atlanta. So at this point, I know what my destination is, and I had chosen to try to get truckers to take me to Boston. And I find out that there's a truck stop called the Port of Albany truck stop. I'm trying to get to the Port of Albany truck stop. P.S. I did not know at the time, and it took a lot for somebody to tell me. The trucker told me without, literally like in Soviet Russia, not acknowledging that he was talking to me, just stood next to me and acted like he was smoking a cigarette. He said, "We could lose our license if we take a passenger. No one's going to take you." I didn't know that. And they thought I was a federal agent acting like a regular pedestrian to see if they catch anybody. That's after I asked 70-something trucks for a ride. Which was great because it was great practice, and humiliating yourself and asking questions and asking for favors. Really very fascinating experience. So I'm trying to find the Port of Albany truck stop. And as that morning, as I'm walking along the New York State Thruway, I see a sign of a motel that says "Now hiring dishwashers." So I said to myself, I've been trying to get work the whole time because I need money so I can buy food. So I say, "That's great. I can wash dishes." So I go into the hotel lobby and I tell them, "It's your lucky day. I'm a college graduate. I'm emotionally stable, and I can wash dishes, and I can even do it at a cut rate." She says, "Sir, that sign is several years old. We don't have a kitchen anymore." So I said, "Okay, well, great. You know what? Can you do me a favor? Could your driver take the hotel van and just drop me at the Port of Albany truck stop?" She said, "We don't have a van anymore." So, okay. And as she says that, a customer comes to check out of his room. And she says, unless this gentleman wants to take you. So the guy looks at me and he says to her, how do I know I can trust him? So I say to the guy, how do you know you could trust me? How do I know that I could trust you? Can't two human beings just trust each other for 10 minutes? So he says, okay, get in the car. Okay. So he pulls the car around. I'm being very delicate. I don't want to be too pushy, too demanding. I ask him if I could sit in the front or you want me to sit in the back, whatever. And we're schmoozing a little bit. It comes out that he's from the Bronx. So I make a mental note of that. Anyway, we go to where we're told to go for the Port of Albany truck stop. And there's nothing there. There's nothing there. I said, sir, you've done your job. You did what we asked. You can drop me off right here and I'll just make my way. I'll figure it out. He says, nah, let me stay with you till you find your truck stop. So he turns around and we're going to ask directions. So he turns around and we go down the highway a little bit. It's an empty stretch of road. We find an Exxon gas station connected to a Subway restaurant. I get out of the car to go in to ask directions. I come in. It's a tiny little Subway counter. It's not even a restaurant, just a counter. The guy manning the Subway counter, his back is to me. He's bent over the oven. And I say, sir, I'm looking for directions for the Port of Albany truck stop. He turns around and he gives me directions, but I notice a very heavy accent. And I am an amateur student of accents. I like to see if I can figure out what zip code you're from. Not forget about what region, but whether, once in a while I'm actually accurate. So I'm not listening to the directions. I'm listening to his accent. I ask him to repeat it because I need the directions. So as he repeats it, my eye moves to the tile, the yellow Subway standard tile, and it says this restaurant owned and operated by Chaim Ben Eliezer. So I go, oh my God. And at this moment, I can't fully describe. The closest I can get to is what Yirmiyahu Hanavi talks about when he talks about an Eish Boer Bekirbi, a fire burning in my belly. I had an uncontrollable urge to set this guy straight because I made up the following story in a second. Chaim Ben Eliezer is a Sephardi of Moroccan descent. His parents lived in Morocco. They moved to Israel, and his father died, and his mother is desperate to be supported. He goes to America where the streets are paved with gold, and he's going to make money and send it back to his mother. He's no longer observant, even though a generation ago he was fully observant. He's a Sephardi. He fully believes in God. He just has abandoned his practice. And I have been sent here by God to save his soul. That's exactly what went happen in an instant in my mind. And so I say to him as he's giving me directions, Betach atalo achelkan. Certainly you don't eat here. Counting on the fact, so his eyes almost pop open, and like pop out of their sockets. And so I repeated it. He says, "Ani lo achel basar." He says, "I don't eat the meat." So I say in Hebrew, "What? Just the meat you don't eat? Everything else you don't eat? Everything else you eat?" And I say in Hebrew, "I am an angel sent from above to tell you that you are not allowed to eat a kazayit in a place like this." This is all in Hebrew. And then I was so emotional and intense that I couldn't do it in Hebrew anymore. And the rest I said in English. And I said, and I'm not leaving until you promise me that you will not eat here ever again. Now, I don't know why I didn't say Tefillin, Shabbat. I don't know what, whatever it is. Now, you got it. So he looks at me and I'm telling you in total shock. And he says, okay, I promise. Yeah, okay, I promise. I didn't know what to do with that. He gives me directions, and I'm spent. I'm drained. I just had a prophetic moment, and I come out, and I plots back in the car with this driver, and I start laughing hysterically. And he says to me, "Why? What's so funny?" I said, "Well, I haven't told you what's going on here." I said, "I'm a rabbi." I knew he knew what a rabbi was because he was from the Bronx already. So I said, I'm a rabbi and I'm disguising my existence. And I've been on this 3 or 4 day trip. And I just came and found a Jew operating a non-kosher restaurant, and I told him that I was an angel sent by God to tell him that he needs to keep kosher, and he believed me. So ridiculous. So the driver says to me, "You don't know who I am." So I say, "Who are you?" He says, "I am the youngest black person ever to be elected to the New York State Legislature, and I'm on the way to Albany to an education committee meeting." And we start talking about various assemblymen and the New York politics and Jews and Orthodox, and the whole thing is hysterical. Anyway, so the point is, to me, that was most memorable because here's the message that I got from that little thing. I'm sitting here. My goal is to not be known as a rabbi. And here, God set up the situation where I encountered a guy, and in spite of myself, I couldn't help but give away. So I say I'm an angel sent by God. In a certain sense, I think we rabbis have to see ourselves that way. I'm an angel sent by God to talk to his children and inspire them. So I don't know if I inspire the guy or not, and I never really followed up with him. But that was to me, it was almost like a cosmic joke that Hashem was making of me. Ha! You think you're going to hide? I'm going to show you. You're going to find a Jewish person over here, and you're going to give it all away. So.
Wow.
There's a secret that great public speakers know. Did you know there's a method for cutting straight through to an audience's heart, grabbing their attention and holding it, and making a memorable impact with your presentation? The best speakers in the world utilize it, and now you can too, every time you get up to speak. Download your free Maggid Method of Public Speaking template at maggidmethod.com, maggidmethod.com. The Maggid Method will teach you how to find your authentic voice, craft meaningful presentations, manage people's attention, and build unbreakable bonds with your audience. Go to maggidmethod.com and download your free copy now.
So I want to ask you, let me refer to an email that you sent when I first reached out to you.
Yeah.
And you wrote, I'm trying to see if I can see it behind the screen here. It says, I'm very interested in having this discussion, but you must know that I break most of the rules of public speaking, and my audiences sometimes suffer, and probably my effectiveness suffers. But I do have something of value to share with your audience, so let's do it. So I think that's a good springboard as any.
Yeah. All right. So what I mean by breaking the rules is I have a habit of speaking too long. I do not prepare thoroughly, which is why I speak too long. And those two things I think are cardinal rules. I know that when I do prepare, a certain amount of spontaneity, which I count on, is lost, and that's my problem. I struggle with preparation because I almost hate everything that I prepared. It seems stilted and pat and predictable. And so I almost count on the high wire act of standing in front of my audience and not knowing exactly to the last minute how I'm going to open. I have the general idea, and sometimes I actually have a powerful question, either on something in the Parsha or on some statement of Chazal that really doesn't make any sense. And it's a powerful question, and I know that there's something really, really meaningful here, but I don't really have it all worked out myself. One of the curses that I have as a public speaker is, it's really funny. I have two mentors when it comes to public speaking. One is my father. She should live and be well, who is I'm sure many people have read his stuff. My father is really, in my opinion, this is just me talking. It's not the truth about my father. It's just Ilan Feldman's version of his father, which is he's a writer. And when he speaks, he's a literary speaker, which means he's got his opening planned, his closing matches his opening in some way. He brings you back to the beginning. It's all thought out. And he doesn't have word for word notes, never did, but he does have some sketch of what he's going to do, and he refers to his notes, and he knows how to actually time his delivery so that he can actually pause and look at his notes and not be uncomfortable, and then look up and then deliver. I don't know how to do that. I do not know how to have notes and have a pause for looking at the notes be meaningful and not be an interruption of my flow. That's just not how I don't do it. My father says to me that he envies my ability to speak well without notes. And I say, I envy your ability to speak well with notes. It's really funny. So that's one mentor. The other mentor is really not in public speaking, although he is also a very effective public speaker, was Rabbi Weinberg, my Rebbe, before he was my father-in-law. And the problem that he presents to me is that he was an extremely original thinker. And so his students have a hard time repeating somebody else's thoughts, even if they're good. So in my sermons, I don't say Rav Hirsch says. I can't do it. Maybe I could do that to set up something, but I find it very difficult to preach important and real thoughts that I believe in that come from other people. I have to own it. I have to be kind of a shinui, at least. Or I have this curse that I feel like I have to be mechadesh in some way. I have to say something new. So the combination of these two mentors really, in a certain sense, inhibits my ability to prepare, because I don't do my father's style. Yet that's the one that I've watched the most in my life, and also I count on a certain spontaneity in the moment. So, yeah.
Let me ask you a question. Is there a part of you that feels that when you're not as prepared as maybe you could be, and some chiddush comes out or some thought that comes out that you weren't expecting, that there's this kind of a rush or a thrill that maybe you're kind of a kli for Hashem's, ideas coming out of you? Is that part of it?
Yes and no. I'm not that religious about it. Meaning I don't feel like necessarily I'm a kli for Hashem's words that come out. Well, let me interrupt myself for a minute. Very often, before I move to speak from my seat to the podium, I verbally articulate, not just think. I say out loud, Hashem, please help me through this and help me speak your words, or please speak through me, something like that. I do that. But what you're talking about is something, but it's not a religious thing for me. I do count on a certain adrenaline and a certain tension that is created by not having it totally mapped out. And that does give me some spontaneity and some emotionality. My audience hears my intensity and my even my shock or my surprise or my incredulity about something, because I'm living it at the moment in a certain sense. It's not something that I've been rehearsing, that I thought about, and that kind of thing. Now, I want to make sure to be clear about something. There's nothing wrong with being incredible or having a kasha on a Thursday, preparing it thoroughly, and then as a good educator, showing the absurdity of the problem and demonstrating that it just makes no sense, right? And reliving that. So I'm not saying that preparation ruins spontaneity. I'm saying that non-preparation certainly makes you spontaneous. You could be spontaneous even when you're prepared. I just don't do that. When I have done that, I've had varying degrees of success. Sometimes I feel flat. I have my wife, who is my best critic because she spares no punches. It says to me, "Why do you say when you're referring to your notes?" And I don't know how to just be quiet and look at my notes. And I don't know how to work those pauses out. I don't have pauses. As a matter of fact, the anti-me is lahavdil, alfei havdalas. He should zecher tzadik lebracha. Rav Moshe Shapiro. If anybody is familiar with his lectures, Rav Moshe Shapiro would pause for sometimes over a minute. That's a long time. Literally, he would finish an idea, he would pause, he would look at his fingernails, as if he did. I don't know. Is he finished? Is he going to say anything else? Is he just I don't know where he's going. And you had a long time to absorb what he just said, which of course needed time because it was very profound. And then he would go on, but like a full minute. And I envy that. And my father used to say, just count to 10, So that was, but I don't pause. I just go from one thing to another fairly intensely.
And how often do you find yourself coming back to certain ideas?
Very often. I think that somebody who's been listening to me for a decent amount of time would say that he basically says the same thing all the time. So I think there are themes that I keep on coming back to in spite of myself. I don't want to do that, but just happened this past Shabbos. Matter of fact, I was very unhappy with my drasha this past Shabbos because it was too predictable for me. It ended up, my question was a good one, but it ended up where I've always end up. A couple themes. One theme to me is, and I think the Rav has to do this, the theme is the importance of kehillah, the idea of a tzibur, the idea that I actually want to be part of a tzibur at my own discomfort, as opposed to what I consider to be a modern day phenomenon, which is that we are Orthodox consumers who want to get our Orthodox fix when we want it, how we want it, as quickly and as easily as possible, and move on with our lives, as opposed to being batel to the tzibur and actually realizing that access to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is really only, not just partially, only through connection to tzibur. So that's one of my major themes. Obviously, I come at it from different angles, but that's one of my major things. Another major theme that I end up coming back to all the time is the idea of the danger of the religious personality becoming a judger of everything, because an observant person has to make judgments. What's right, what's wrong, but it's like a gun. When we become a judger, we end up judging all the time, and that creates judgmentalism and self-righteousness. And being righteous and being self-righteous are not the same thing, but they're closely related. It's very easy to become self-righteous and watch me be righteous, watch me do the right thing. And then it's a self-defeating phenomenon where doing a mitzvah ends up being a reflection on me and not a service of God. So I talk about that a lot. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, so I do find myself coming back to certain things. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to ask you something else that I read in an article that struck my curiosity. You said that my greatest teacher was the shul itself. I learned in early, not to look at Balabatim as what they are, but what they can become. And I read also that you take 2 Shabbos in a year, one to praise the Kehillah and one to give them Musar. And I wanted to hear about that a little bit.
All right, so I have to. It's funny. I don't want to give too much credit to my father, although I owe him everything. But my father had the last Shabbos of the year before Rosh Hashanah in a different shul, and it's the same synagogue, but in a different demographic. I had an "I love you" Shabbos, and basically the theme of the talk was, listen, in a few days, hundreds of people are going to flood into shul who are not normally here. Some of them are going to sit in your seat. They're not going to know it's your seat. We want to make sure to be open to them, and so on and so forth. And meanwhile, you guys who are my regulars who are here all the time, I just want you to know I love you. You're special, and it was something like that. And people, it's amazing to me. It's just amazing to me. Intelligent, sophisticated, mature, emotionally healthy adults love hearing that. They come. I know people who used to come just because this is I love you Shabbos, and so they know I'm going to say I love you, and I say it, and then they sit there and and then at Kiddush, Rabbi, I love you too. It's unbelievable. Speaking about love, just let me deviate for a minute because I think it's really topical if we're talking about that. Another thing that I find very, very powerful is when I create an artificial reason for people to notice each other or relate to each other, they grab it and they do it and they have a tremendous amount of fun. It's corny, it's hokey, you can call it out of towny, whatever it is. But I think sometimes the rabbi has to have courage to be a little bit corny. And when I say turn to the person, I've done this on Rosh Hashanah, by the way. But if I have to tell you a story, I'm rambling here, but I got to tell you a story. This story is just too good to be true. On one Rosh Hashanah, I decided that I was going to ask everybody to actually meditate together, so that I led up to it, and then I declared that we're going to have like 2 minutes of total silence, and I asked everybody to close their eyes and contemplate certain things. And I gave them a certain thing to think about. Anyway, I had a friend who was an ordained non-pulpit rabbi who was there. He had fallen asleep during my talk. He woke up while everybody was quiet and had their eyes closed, obviously because it got quiet, so he woke up. He thought there had been some kind of a gas attack because he looks at a packed shul, and the entire shul's got their eyes closed and nobody's moving, including the rabbi. I sat down and meditated in my seat in the middle of the sermon. He really thought there was a medical emergency here. Anyway, so
when camping and during COVID, they came back and entered civilization and
yeah. So, but my point is that sometimes it takes courage to do something really different. For me, it's courage. It's just like literally I have to steel myself because are you kidding me? So that's one thing. That is, I love you, Shabbos. I still try to maintain it, although it doesn't have the same power because we now have a shul, and I mourn to a certain degree. I mourn the loss of the diversity, but we now have a shul of people who come every Shabbos and they come on Rosh Hashanah. And it's not that we don't have that Yizkor crowd thing, so the whole premise of the lovely thing is a little bit obscured now. The other Shabbos, which I do keep alive, and I've done it probably 30 something times in a row, is Kotzer Ruach Shabbos from Parshas Va'era, and it's based on what I found after I created this. I found out that the Ralbag says this, and the reason I'm so happy is because the premise that I use, I felt is really actually apikorsis. But now that the Ralbag says it, I'll take it. And the premise is that it says, Lo shamu Hashem mikotza ruach avodah kasha. So I say that is not their kotza ruach. Moshe had kotza ruach. He didn't deliver the full message of redemption from God to Klal Yisrael because he was afraid they would think he was crazy or out of touch with reality. So he didn't deliver it fully. Therefore, they couldn't listen to him because he didn't say it the way Hashem wanted him to. The Ralbag says, Kotzer Ruach Shel Moshe. I couldn't believe it when I saw that. Anyway, So I say to them all year long, I don't tell you the truth because I'm afraid you'll think I'm crazy. This Shabbos, I'm going to honor Kotzer Ruach Shabbos. I'm going to tell you what I really think. And then next week, we'll get together and act like it didn't happen. Right? And then, so therefore, I give myself license to say some outrageous things. Over the years, I've said some pretty outrageous things.
What's the attendance like in the ratio for the Love Shabbos versus the Kotzer Ruach Shabbos? How's the attendance?
The attendance. The Love Shabbos, like I say, it's kind of lost its power because it's not. There's no drama about the crowds coming and that kind of a thing. I still do it, but it doesn't have the same. For some reason, it doesn't have the same thing. The people who are there love it, but nobody. On the Kotzer Ruach Shabbos, I have people who might otherwise have davened in other minyanim come in some significant numbers to hear it, or at least at the Shabbos table they say, "What did the rabbi say today at Kotzer Ruach Shabbos?" And there were times when there were some very important things that had to be brought to the attention of the community, and I did that on Kotzer Ruach Shabbos.
But it doesn't scare them off.
What's that?
It doesn't scare them off.
Not at all. Just the opposite. They're there because they want to hear what the rabbi thinks that they'll think makes him crazy. They want to hear the extreme view.
So give me example of give me a for instance.
Well, I give you, for instance, this is probably 15 years ago or more. I said, okay, here it goes, folks. You can live without a television in your house. You can actually live without a television in your house. Not only that, your life will actually get better. And so I had two people who got rid of their TVs that week. You know, one year the thing where we had a woefully inadequate women's mikveh. I said, by this time next year, we're going to have a beautiful women's mikveh. You know, how are we going to do it with the money, blah, blah, blah. I have no idea. It can be done. It needs to be done. It's going to be done. One year I took on the whole idea of convenience Judaism, in which everything's got to be done easy, and you have to buy your prepackaged salt dip for the Seder and all that kind of stuff. Whatever. For some reason, I find it harder and harder to find anything new that I haven't talked about all year long. I'm not sure what that's about. I equate it somehow with the fact that the shul has become a little bit more uniform in its observance now, and somehow it becomes a little bit more difficult to come up with some new stuff. But we still keep the Kotzer Rosh Shabbos. It's kind of like a Shabbos Hagadol Drasha in a certain way. Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very, very fascinating. So one more quote, which is that
you've done your homework.
Yeah, I try to. So it says here. This is an interview. I think this is going back maybe 15 years or so. It says, "I felt totally inhibited, totally inadequate, and totally insufficient. I was following my father's footsteps, and it took years to develop my own style. My greatest asset and my greatest deficit is that I'm my father's son."
Oh, yeah, that's the Mishpacha magazine cover article. I want to remind the audience that I am a cover boy for Mishpacha magazine. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
so that quote is accurate, but it's about the entire rabbinate, not about drushas. Although to some degree, it might have implied the drushas too. Yeah, it's funny. Memory is a tricky thing. And if you would have asked me that same question now, I would have said very professionally that in my early years in the rabbinate, I felt that the need to reassure the congregation that this young, intense, non-tennis playing rabbi was still going to be somebody you could deal with. That was my goal. The first several years, I was not going to rock the boat. I trust what that quotation in Mishpacha magazine says, which is that first of all, I had a desire not to in any way reflect negatively on anything that my father did or did not do. So if I did anything differently, I was afraid that it would in somehow way reflect on my father. So I was inhibited in that sense, for sure. And there's no question about it. Having grown up here, there were pluses and minuses in serving a congregation in which I was Ilan and not Rabbi Feldman. The truth is, looking back now, the undeveloped parts of me, I don't know how they put up with me. I don't know how they put up with me the first several years. I must have offered something that compensated, but I'm not sure what it is. I was extremely youthful and undeveloped in certain ways, but somehow they were generous and compassionate and put up with me.
Uh-huh. How was it those first couple of years in your father's shadow? Was he sitting?
I never experienced it as a shadow. People said you have big shoes to fill, and I would say to myself, I agree that my father is and was a great rabbi, and I have my own style, and he was the first one to encourage me to be that way, and I didn't feel like I was being compared to him. The one thing that bothered me, and there are a lot of things that didn't bother me that could have, but didn't. The one thing that bothered me was when people would come to me with trying to make suggestions, and they would say, your father always or your father never. Your father never, blah, 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 blah. Or your father always, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, for some reason, that bothered me. That got to me. Like, come on. Yeah, this is not the same show. It's not the same circumstance. Not only that, you just created a myth about my father that he did. So, for example, somebody came to me. I remember this. They said, your father knew how to get what he wanted from the board. Right? You have to learn how to do that. So I remember a very dramatic and important moment in the community's development where my father, who rarely went to board meetings, my father came to a board meeting to plead, cajole, and advocate for a particular decision, and the board voted against him, voted it down right there in front of him. A close vote, but they voted no. And it was a major problem for the community. Forget about whether it was a personal rejection. So my father was not, once he retired, he was a superhero. Everything he did was great. He never made any mistakes. And he was he was all powerful and all wise and knew how to do everything. When I was his assistant rabbi for 11 years, I had a constant flow of people who didn't want to criticize him, so they'd criticize him to me, And again, I emphasize my father is an unbelievably successful, effective, experienced, knowledgeable, and effective rabbi. But the point is that Achrei Mos Kadoshim, Baruch Hashem, my father shall live in well to 120. But once he retired, he could do no wrong. It's already happening to me already, by the way. My poor assistant rabbi is told behind the scenes, Rabbi Feldman always this, Rabbi Feldman never this. And I tell my assistant rabbi, forget about me. Do your thing.
Yeah. So I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know you're very busy.
I'm having too much time. This is too much fun. This is therapy for me. Go ahead.
Great. So I always ask if you had two bits of advice, and you have an assistant rabbi, I'm sure that you mentor. So two bits of advice for a rabbi starting out on his speaking career. What to set him up for success. What would be the most important parts that you would focus on?
And you're not talking specifically about sermons or drushes.
That's my focus, but if you have something else, that's fine too. But usually I ask it in regards to the speaking. What would you tell them in terms of that slot, how to approach it, any methodologies, any philosophies behind it, some goals for it?
Yeah, I would say this is about the rabbinate, but it's about sermons too, because the sermons are obviously a reflection of what's going on. A rabbi must be involved in personal growth. And it's an occupational hazard of the rabbinate that you can feel like you are involved in Torah and involved in halacha and involved in Musar just because of what you teach in classes or in a sermon. If you need to be challenging yourself and demanding of yourself one way or another in a personal level, whether it's with a chavrusa, whether it's with a rebbe that you're in touch with or something like that, or some kind of even self-growth program or whatever it is, you got to be involved in personal growth. If you are, you will find the energy and the excitement and the passion to talk about all kinds of things because you're challenging yourself and you've experienced failure and victory. It's really important to be experiencing failure and victory in your own life. And the only way you experience failure is to try new things, and the only way you experience victory is to try new things. So that to me is really important. Second thing is that there's a cumulative value. The rabbinate is filled with small incidences of chesed, small opportunities of chesed. I've got somebody who I need to be in touch with today in the hospital. I haven't been in touch with them for 3 days. I should have been. Nobody's mad at me yet, but the point is I want to be in touch with people. It's not going to change my rabbinate if I do or if I don't. But when you're invested in people, even small minor things, cumulatively, you become known to your congregation as somebody who cares for them and loves them. And that makes you effective in the larger picture. So don't dismiss the small acts of noticing somebody at Kiddush, going over to somebody at Kiddush and making them feel included or acknowledge them and so on and so forth. It's all these things make a tremendous difference cumulatively.
Yeah. Maybe if you have another moment, just full circle about the storytelling that Rabbi Rakowski said he learned from you. Where did you learn that technique from?
I got that from, it's called a vivid share. It was a technique that Landmark Education taught me. And the idea is right there in the middle of the story. And it used to be when the New York Times used to think of itself as a newspaper and not a political opinion piece. They used to, the stories I noticed that almost all the stories brought you right into the middle of the story. So-and-so in Vietnam rose from the ashes of her destroyed home and looked around. That's how the story starts. And so you're right there in the middle of it, right there. You don't know why the house was destroyed. You don't know if she's a good person or a bad person, but you're right there with her. So that kind of a thing makes it done. I find it difficult to do that because it's a little bit theatrical. On the other hand, I think people don't mind a little theater. They don't mind. Oh, wow, he's up to something over here, So, when something happens, instead of saying, yesterday I went shopping and this amazing thing happened, and I want to tell you about it. You've already killed it. you already killed it. Oh, okay. What you would say, I was standing at the checkout line when the person behind me yelled, okay, I'm right there with you, right? There's a big difference. And supposed to say, by the way, let me get my pet peeve off my chest here. I hold that the rabbinate ought to create an 11th commandment. Thou shalt not say in this week's parsha. Strike those words from your lexicon, because everybody expects that to be said, and their mind is going, this is not anything I'm listening to because it's this week's parsha. Take that phrase out of your lexicon. Just start. Moshe said, don't say in this week's parsha Moshe said, just say, Moshe said. Just say it.
All right, with that, we'll track you down for a part 2. And
excellent.
All right, thank you so much.
You've been listening to The Maggid Method, and I'm Daniel Steinberg. Learn more about the Maggid Method at maggidmethod.com, maggidmethod.com. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.